Well, Pete Hegseth's in hot water a little bit and continuing to boil up as questions remain about the boat strikes in the Caribbean. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is trying to distance himself from what they're calling a second strike on this particular boat. Lawmakers from both parties are calling it potentially a war crime. Here's ABC News Chief Global Affairs anchor Martha Raddatz.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth insists the decision to launch a second strike against a suspected drug boat in September was not his call, but Admiral Mitch Bradley, the mission commander. The Washington Post story said that Bradley launched the second strike on survivors clinging to a boat because of Hegseth's initial order to kill everyone. But the day after the strike, Hegseth said he had watched the mission in real time. But now, Hegseth says he left the room before the second strike and didn't learn of it for hours later.
So, look, dozens of people have been killed so far. And there was even a Coast Guard report that I've been seeing online from 2024 saying that 21% of the boats that were pulled over by the Coast Guard suspected of carrying drugs did not have any drugs on board. And now there's a family also from, I think, Colombia, maybe, it must be Venezuela, who is suing, saying that their father and husband was a fisherman and he was basically summarily executed by the United States. So one of the issues, I think, is the way the story's been changing. So you heard a little bit from Martha Raddatz there that he initially said he was there watching. So when the Washington Post broke a story saying there was a second strike, there was drone footage showing survivors in the water clinging to wreckage of the ship. He initially said, first of all, it's fake news. It was planted by critics. He went on a particular news station a day after the strike to tell them that he had watched the operation unfold in real time. He was there for the whole thing. And then there was confirmation. The White House communications director said, yes, there was a second strike, and this was after both Hegseth and the president had denied that there was. Then the Caroline Leavitt said, well, actually, yes. There was, and now he's saying, well, it was fog of war, and I didn't actually see anything, but it was done. I left the room, in fact, and it was Admiral Frank Bradley who did it, and I support him. I mean, if you're going to throw somebody under the bus, that is the way I like it. It's out there in the open.
Throw him way under. So, we're talking about first strike and second strike, and I think there are a lot of people who don't necessarily find a distinction in terms of whether or not it was inappropriate, whether or not it was a war crime. But the second strike seems to be more brazen. So if you've got a boat and it's a high-speed boat, it's traveling, it may have drugs, it's coming to the United States, we need to stop it. You do. You stop it. You've stopped the threat, whatever you're saying, and I don't know that it's either there or not. Then you've got people clinging to the side of the boat. They're hanging literally for their lives. And you do a second strike to do nothing except kill them.
Yeah,
that's the only purpose of it. It's not to stop drugs. It's not to prevent something from coming. I mean, these people are just hanging on, and people are concerned now. And this is why we have now bipartisan concern in Congress saying, "Hey, we need to figure this out." Hegseth saying, I didn't order it. In fact, I stepped out of the room. He's saying Admiral Bradley did it. And Bradley's saying, well, I was given the order to leave no survivors.
Right.
So, who's telling the truth here? If you've got a boat and people are hanging and you've got an order, leave no survivors, I guess you order a second strike.
It's interesting from the perspective of defining a war crime is when you're killing people who have no opportunity to defend themselves, right? That they're not actually war combatants. It's interesting. So Senator John Curtis from Utah issued a statement to KSL TV. He said he's concerned about the strike. He supports the oversight efforts by the Senate Armed Services Committee. And as chair of Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, he wants to conduct his own oversight into the strike. And I've talked with people close to Senator Curtis this morning, and they say he is interested in getting to the truth of what actually happened.
Yeah, and Curtis, who of course is Republican, declined an on-camera interview and did not respond to questions about whether he has concerns with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's leadership. Hegseth on Tuesday said he wasn't aware of any survivors of the vote. We talked about that. And then he said, he used this phrase, it was the fog of war.
Right.
Like brain fog. I don't know. The aftermath of the first strike, we're all kind of like, whoa, we're in a fog. But somebody still gave the order, or at least the people that were pulling the triggers had an order in their mind that, hey, we need to do something about this. And I mean, Senator Curtis is going to get, and others are going to get to the bottom of this, maybe, but there's certainly going to be some inquiry. And I mean, there's going to be international tribunals looking at this. I mean,
potentially.
Is this a war crime? It could very well be. What happens if it is? They're not going to extradite, Pete Hegseth. Who knows?
Not yet.
Yeah.
But look, the fog of war is a term that's been used since basically Napoleon, so early 1800s. But it really was used to describe uncertainty in military operations. So, maybe you can't get clear communication from the front line, or, the weather has obscured your ability to tell what's going on in the battlefield. To use it to describe maybe there was smoke coming from this boat after the first strike, it seems a little bit of a stretch to call it the fog of war.
We continue to see on the television these boats that are traveling across the water, and it looks like when they're hit, it's hard to imagine anyone surviving. They just literally are almost obliterated. And the first one or two or three we talked about, these are drug people coming in. Now we're learning more and more. Maybe it was a fisherman.
Right.
Maybe it was something other than just drugs. And we're up to 80 some odd deaths. I mean,
I think the concerns from a lot of people, including members of Congress, right, is we haven't declared war against Venezuela. There are some people who say, well, there's a war on drugs. Well, we have due process, and we have it for a reason, right? And when you have the Coast Guard itself saying at least 1 in 5 boats do not have drugs on them, it seems like maybe we're doing too much, right, without asking the right questions. Certainly there are members of Congress saying, and Rand Paul's one of them, but saying this is our domain. This is where we should be involved as Congress, declaring war. And right now we haven't declared war.
Yeah, we often think of the war on drugs, but that's not a formal declaration by any means. It's something that our country's been involved in, and off and on. What do we do about drugs? And I know a lot of people feel like, why should we let the drugs hit our shores in the first place? Do something about it. But there's always, and I guess the attorney in me is always this whole due process. Well, maybe we should find out if in fact they do have drugs. And
right.
It used to be intervention. It used to be you'd see these boats and the Coast Guard could come in and say, hey, what's going on?
Right.
Stop the boat,
Yep.
do a search, whatever you need to do. It was never shoot first and ask questions later as we dealt with these type of operations. It seems to be the way that the United States is dealing with cases now, and that can't be a good look for the rest of the world.
Well, I think we're going to see Pete Hegseth needing to testify in front of Congress. I don't know if they'll close those hearings if they're classified information, but I think we can expect that this week.
Yes, and thank goodness for the bipartisan leadership who are at least going to look into it. Maybe nothing will come of it, but let's find out who gave these orders and what they were.